Yes. I don't know.
No. Yeah.
So he's the man. Yeah. That is rare.
No, I know.
It doesn't even.
Well, I mean,
It's really peculiar, but it's pretty cool.
I better not post that. That's gonna throw me off.
yeah. It looks like a pain in the butt.
we still look like
Okay, folks, take your seats. We'll get started in just 1 minute.
Like the two lights on the side.
All right, thank you so much for coming out to the last day of the 50th anniversary Comic-Con. It's a real privilege to be here today. It's great to have so many astonishing artists joining us on stage, and so great to have such an astonishing community here inside of this room joining to support the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund and our work, and here to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Comic-Con. And before we get started today, I think it's really important to note that Comic-Con is put together by people that have a passion for community, a passion for comics, and a singular focus on serving each other. This isn't a product or a service, this is a community and an ethic, and it's put together by people that work hard all year. It's put together by people that are volunteering their time here at the show, and they might be down on the floor buying whatever exclusive thing that people are waiting in line for, or going to other panels, although we all know this is the single best panel to be at. Well, thank you again, the Comic-Con team, and thank you for being here. So, as part of my current service at the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund, our work is to provide the ability for comics to speak broadly and to speak freely, and to have the freedom to explore the ideas that make us human. And we're really honored today to have three tremendous practitioners that are opening hearts and minds and creating really, really engaging work. And so they are going to be creating live art for you. You're going to have an opportunity to watch them create this work on the screen here. You're going to have an opportunity to ask them questions. And when we get to the end of the hour, you're going to hear me drop this voice and enter into my auctioneering voice, because you're going to have an opportunity to actually take these home with you as donations to Comic Book Legal Defense Fund. And so we start with the legend, Hall of Fame inductee, the great Wendy Pini. Let's have a round of applause. Sitting beside Wendy, we have a member of the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund board, which of course we all know that's the most important thing, right? Just a nationally recognized former ambassador of National Young People's Literature, the MacArthur winner, just all of the big awards that you could imagine for comics have gone to this guy. And he doesn't do it for the awards, he does it because he has a lot to say to the community as a teacher, as a parent, as a thought leader. It's a great honor to welcome to the stage Jean Wen Yang. And seated beside Jean is one of my absolute favorite people in comics. His work has graced works by Grant Morrison, Robert Kirkman, and many of others of those top echelon creators, and they all love to work with him because despite the commitment to goofiness that he presents, he is one of the smartest image thinkers that you will ever meet in comics. A big round of applause for the great Chris Vernon. So why don't we begin our presentation today with Wendy. So Wendy, do you, after having a Hall of Fame career and creating work...
That's so new.
And so well deserved. A round of applause for that. It's really just tremendous, Wendy. And do you get frightened of the blank page? Is it intimidating?
Mm-mm.
So
No, because every time I have a blank page in front of me, I know that in a few minutes I'm going to be with my people.
So can you show us how you approach that? And maybe that'll give some confidence to some others out there that do have fright of the blank page. So Show us how you do it.
Just start drawing. Well, I don't have a pencil, so this is going to be freehand. And so the easiest ElfQuest character for me to draw freehand is Cutter. So I'm going to give this a try.
Would you like a pencil?
Yes.
Oh, well, okay. That would be nice.
See, I told you CBLDF was a team effort.
That's awesome.
Got a couple of choices for you here, mechanical and
Just any old thing, just an old, this is the type of pencil that's been around since 200 years. Okay, let's put him in a kind of a typical heroic pose.
So Wendy, you said that you know that in a few moments you're going to be with your people. So could you describe the journey of how you found your people and how you brought them to life?
I found them when I was about 2 years old because we have proof of drawings I did when I was 2 that I was drawing elves. I'd like to introduce my husband Richard, who is essential to everything I do. He's right here in the front. And Richard is the archivist of my artwork, and he managed to save drawings from way back in my childhood, and so we have proof that I've been drawing fantasy characters, and especially elves, since I could walk.
And so when you started, they grew with you. So what was the relationship? Were you figuring out the world through their eyes as much as yours?
I always wanted to tell stories about characters that were looking for where they belong. I've been a storyteller most of my life, and every story I ever wrote was about an outsider or a group of outsiders looking for where their true home is. So ElfQuest is just a natural extension of that.
And that seems to be a real core element of comics fandom, really. And you were really instrumental in the foundational years of comics fandom. So tell us what that seems like.
Well, this is where we owe a tremendous debt to San Diego Comic-Con, because when we got started in 1977 and released our first issue of ElfQuest in 1978, it was Comic-Con that was the venue that introduced us to our audience, and we began to realize who was reading ElfQuest and who we were telling our story to, and it helped us. It helped kind of shape us, shape our professional attitudes, and shape how we related to people, and learned how to deal with extreme enthusiasm to the point where we've had a couple of fainters and a couple of a lot of criers. And you kind of learn a lot about human nature just interacting with people who appreciate what you do.
And what is that experience like when you meet these people that connect with your people as strongly as you do?
Well, it varies. It depends on the person. Some of them are extremely shy, and you have to sort of bring them out and let them know it is okay to say whatever they want to say. And in other cases, you can't shut them up. And so we have to kind of gently guide them and say, there are other people in line. We thank you very much, but let's move on. And so again, you learn how to handle people without offending, embarrassing, whatever it takes. Because that's the main thing, is just to be as kind as you can and to treat people as well as you can. And that's the message. That's the basic message of ElfQuest that we repeated over and over again. Is we wanted to create a race, a group of people who aren't superheroes. They're not out to save the world. They're not out to be, defenders of good against evil. They're just out to treat others as well as they possibly can, given certain circumstances that they don't have any control over.
That's a really powerful and important message for the world we live in right now.
Yeah.
There's no question that we're living in really mean times.
Yeah.
And you know, the work of the Comic Legal Defense Fund right now is, you know, really right at the epicenter of that. I mean, just this last week, some of our work involves some of the meanness and exclusion that Wendy's talking about. We're really encountering a disturbing trend in identity censorship right now.
Yes.
And by identity censorship, I mean people being censored simply because of who they are. I'm going to tell you a quick story about a case that we're working on here at Comic-Con. It's happening in real time. It involves a library in Leander, Texas, which is near Austin, and an author named Lila Sturgis. Any Lumberjanes fans in here? Yeah, it's good stuff. So I see, you know, about half the room. So Lila created she's the writer of a Lumberjanes graphic novel called The Infernal Compass, which just came out. And she was scheduled to speak at the Leander Public Library on July 9th. And 2 hours before she was scheduled to give her lecture, she got a email and a call saying, "We've canceled your event tonight."
What?
Why is my event canceled? She sent a note and they said, well, you know, we're revising some of our policies and this fell through the cracks, and you know, we just had to cancel it. And so she dug in, and they told her they're revising policies for the way outside events at the library are scheduled and organized, so they're canceling things until they revise that and stuff, and that they might be asking all speakers that are speaking where youth might be present to do background checks. She might need to do it, but they're just figuring it out, so chill out. And this smells fishy. So she tweeted about it. We got in touch with her and said, could you please send us more information? And she did. And we did some digging of our own and discovered that this comes in the wake of a moral panic that emerged after Drag Queen Story Hour, a celebration of Pride. A bunch of people protested its inclusion. And in the wake of that, the library canceled Lila, who happens to be a transgendered author. And she's the only one. So no other speakers were canceled. She wasn't even an outside group, so she shouldn't have even been canceled. She was invited by the library itself. So that was a violation. And they didn't ask anybody else to participate in any kind of a background check process. So it's discrimination. It's discrimination for who she is, not what she writes, not the content of the work, not any objection to the material at hand, which would be censorship, but of another kind. This is a really insidious censorship that says who you are is unwelcome. So we found out about this, and of course we're appalled, and immediately took action, pulling together a coalition of heavy-hitting free speech organizations, including the National Coalition Against Censorship, the American Library Association, the Authors Guild, the ACLU even weighed in after we sent our letter, expressing what you're doing is discrimination, what you're doing is against the law, what you're doing is wrong, and what you're doing is depriving the community, especially the kids in the community, of access to a really important author with a powerful message. And the fact that she's transgender is not essential to her literary work, but it also makes her a good role model for other kids who are underrepresented. Reinstate this as soon as possible. So we put this out last Thursday ahead of a city council meeting. We executed a social media campaign encouraging people to tweet at the library. I encourage you to continue that campaign. We want to keep the pressure on so that they do the right thing, get Lila back in the library, and stop discriminating against people for who they are. So that's the work that the CBLDF does, and that's the work that we're here supporting today.
Well, and this is why Richard and I have supported CBLDF for years, because it's our belief that everybody's voice has a right to be heard, everybody's point of view. It's the message we put forth in ElfQuest since we started back in 1977. And can you imagine how astounded we are? Because the 70s was actually more enlightened than the era we're living in now. There were things we simply took for granted, like, for example, something strange that just pops to mind is, anybody ever seen the movie with Charlton Heston, Omega Man? Yeah. Okay. It was absolutely not anything anybody thought about that Charlton Heston's leading lady was black. And this was in the early 70s. We didn't think anything about it. But, and this is not to say that discrimination didn't exist in the early 70s, but to see what's going on right now, and hatred and misogyny towards women in particular, as more and more women shine their light in the comics industry. This is the stuff of great stories, and we need to tell more stories about this kind of discrimination and how to combat it.
That's absolutely right. And fiction, I always say fiction is the first draft of policy, and stories provide the conceptual framework for people to understand how the world can look and how the world can be. It's not an accident that the science fiction technological optimism culture of the 1960s, embodied by things like Star Trek, led to these things that we all carry in our pocket. And right now we live in times where, again, they have the right to do it, but our entire culture is focused on morbidity for the last 20 years. Is it any wonder that we're in the situation we're in after rooting for the difficult men genre of television, and the genre of television where you're titillated by the vicious death of somebody that you cared about? And those were important stories that reflected a lot of anxieties in our time, and they're important to be there. But right now, I think we need to imagine, how do we move forward in this? And it's really interesting, Wendy, your body of work and the hope that your body of work encounters is kind of more timely than ever.
Well, and we're both proud of that and startled by it, that issues that we cared about back in the mid-70s when we got started are even more prominent and more hot button today, and some of it makes us very sad. Homophobia, we thought that would be done with by 2019, long before 2019, and to see it more rampant than ever, and racism, bigotry, fear of the other, fear of someone else who's not like you for whatever reason. It doesn't make sense to Richard and me, and we've always expressed that in our ElfQuest stories, that kind of fear, that just because someone is different, why should you necessarily fear them until you see the content of their character? And, well, it's just, as you put earlier, as you were talking, we live in fearful and angry and very easily triggered times. And so I'm glad that ElfQuest stories can be maybe comforting, maybe uplifting to people, because they still deal with those issues. We will always deal with those issues.
What are some of the things that you think each of us can do on the individual level to make things just a little bit better?
Well, number one, treat everybody as well as you can. That doesn't mean you have to be Pollyanna or goody-goody. It just means be kind. Try kindness first. And, you don't have to be a soft touch. You don't have to let people walk over you. But just be kind first. And the second thing you can do if you are a creator is think about telling stories. Think about getting stories out there that are great examples of what you believe is important about how to behave in the world, how to communicate. I think communication is right now the single most important thing in the world. Good communication, people listening to each other's point of view and not necessarily rejecting them outright. I think listening, being kind, being courteous, and realizing that the other person has just as much right to where they're coming from as you do, and just find some kind of possible meeting ground. That's the way to heal the situation we're in right now.
I couldn't agree with you more, and I think that merits our applause. So it's not every day that you have a Hall of Fame creator on the stage with you, somebody who has influenced huge generations of comics, and so I shouldn't be monopolizing Wendy's attention. Are there questions for Wendy out there in the audience? We'll take a moment to formulate them, and as they come up, feel free to raise your hand.
Yeah, and don't be shy, because I find it very easy to talk while I'm looking, so go right ahead.
So while they're formulating, please do just like jump in.
I have got a question. So
Yes.
how do you feel about kind of jump starting like elves became like their whole like a whole genre in the 80s? Like, does it feel weird to have like created a whole genre by yourself? And then for like I grew up with Elf Warrior, which is like a totally gross nihilistic like it's like basically almost like a direct attack on you.
Oh yeah, it's an ElfQuest backlash.
Yeah. So how did you handle that?
I think it's hilarious. No, there have been parodies of ElfQuest that have been generally kind, and some of them have been really mean, and you kind of learn to take it in stride and realize that you don't necessarily have to take it personally, because those things say more about the parodies than it does about you. You know, you had to create the thing in the first place to give them the opportunity to either put it down or raise it up. So if you were the one who did the thing in the first place and they weren't, you've got to remember that. Is that a good answer?
That's a great answer.
All right, other questions for Wendy out there?
Sure, anything.
Down here.
Yeah, this is just a simple one. When you're drawing, do you tend to listen to music or audiobooks?
Oh boy, what a great question. Music is essential to me. I can tell you, I can go back and look at some of the oldest ElfQuest art, and I can tell you what I was listening to when I drew a certain panel or a certain bit of action. And, music just kind of, I would say, almost guides my mind. It's like a dance, and I like to just have the art be very flowing and express the line of beauty, and that means a lot of curves and suggestion and motion. I'm a cartoonist, and I've had some experience in animation, so I like my characters to always look as if they are right in the in-between of an animated action. And music helps me to draw in that kind of a flow, so yes, I love to listen to exciting, dramatic music while I'm working.
Got any artists in particular that inspire you?
Artists who inspire me?
Musical artists.
Oh gosh. James Horner, Jerry Goldsmith, John Williams to a certain extent. But Horner, Goldsmith, James Newton Howard, and lately Bear, he composed the music for Godzilla. What's Bear's last name?
Crary.
Yeah, right. You guys know who he is. So I just like music that has good themes that get developed. I love opera. I'm crazy about Puccini, especially if I'm drawing a really dramatic, sad scene or something like that. So yeah, music is really, really important.
Okay. Any other questions from Wendy out there? Yes.
What's your favorite currently published book?
Favorite currently published book?
I'm really going to disappoint you. When you make your living at it, you don't necessarily entertain yourself with it. So I am someone who loves biographies, especially of great actors and actresses. I'm a big Bette Davis fan, and Richard is great at finding books for me about my favorite movies. Let's see, what else? I'm a political activist, so I really, really stay abreast of the news, and I do a lot of my reading online that way. But as far as sitting down and reading a comic book, unless it's by someone who's a really treasured friend of mine who's working on a project and I want to give them my support, I don't read comics. sorry. Maybe a manga. I'm still quite a manga fan, and I will take a look at a manga that has terrific artwork.
Well, manga too is interesting because you were one of the first artists in the States to really look at manga and be inspired by their pacing and the design. It really lent to vitality, I think.
Absolutely. ElfQuest is considered in some circles as the first American manga. And it was the first comic book produced in America to be influenced by Japanese anime and manga. My sensei was Osamu Tezuka, who's the creator of Astro Boy, King of the White Lion. Just, little minor characters you might know of.
What's your key, Tezuka, for those that have not had the privilege of engaging in his work that you ask people to start with?
Read the Phoenix Saga.
So good.
It will change your life.
Yeah, I'll co-sign that. Phoenix is amazing. I saw a question over on this side, please.
Yeah.
I guess this ties into what you were just saying about not reading comics. Do you consider yourself a comic book artist? Because I gotta be honest, I've always been telling people I got into comics very late in life.
I'll repeat.
But watching this, it just occurred to me, I was reading this stuff when I was 12, and I never ever considered it a comic. That was a book.
That's interesting. So the question was, do you consider yourself a comic book artist? Because the person asking the question said I never differentiated when I was growing up reading it. It was just another book. And before I turn that over, I'm going to just add that Richard and Wendy were some of the very first people to create a business relationship where their stuff went out into the bookstore environment. And there were those I think there was Donning Starbo's collections of ElfQuest before anybody else. So with that, do you consider yourself, a comic book person or just another artist working in the book arts?
I never intended to be a comic book artist. Not a lot of people know this, but I always saw myself first as an illustrator. I started my career as a science fiction and fantasy illustrator for magazines like Galaxy and If. And I was selling my artwork at fantasy and science fiction conventions very early. So by the time Richard and I met in 1969, I already had a reputation as a science fiction and fantasy artist, and I was going to conventions and gaining some notoriety for myself. And I thought that was the direction my career was going to go. I was always a lover of animation, and I hoped that at some point in my career I could get involved with animation. But in 1977, there was just this explosion of interest in fantasy and sci-fi with Star Wars, and Ralph Bakshi brought out Wizards, and we heard he was also working on Lord of the Rings. And so I told Richard the idea for this story that I had, which was, again, like I said earlier, like any story that I had written previously. It was about a race of elfin beings who were looking for a home, looking for their identity. And he fell in love with the story, and we talked about how to do it. And at first we were thinking maybe we should present it as a screenplay or write it as a novel, and comics was not the first choice for getting ElfQuest out there. But then we decided the best thing we could do is meld the writing with the art. And as I think it was Will Eisner who said that comics are really movies on paper, and we always hope that someday ElfQuest would make it to the screen in some way. So that's a very complicated way of saying I became a comics artist because I kind of had to. If I wanted ElfQuest to be told and envisioned exactly the way I saw it in my head, then it was important to do the work myself. And of course, it could not possibly have been done without Richard's aid and facilitating. He taught himself by the seat of his pants to be a publisher. And we kind of were on the ground level of the independent comics movement. It was a very exciting time. But in all this time, no, I couldn't really say that I would say or label myself as simply a comic book artist. I don't quite know what I am, and that's probably why people to this day don't quite know what to make of ElfQuest.
And I'll briefly interject there too. If you have the role model of somebody like Tezuka and the Japanese business model and creative model of comics, there is much more fluidity between the manga and the anime and all of the permutations. And so if you're inspired by that, it really becomes you're building the blueprint for a world and a franchise, not franchise in the gross 21st century exploitation way that we talk about it, but franchise in the sense of, Nausicaa is the blueprint for, the manga is the blueprint for, what became the film and what became all of the, surrounding merch that people use because they believe in the values of it. And it seems like that was really embodied in your work. How did you arrive there in the 1970s? This stuff wasn't coming over.
I know. It was just, I was introduced to anime and manga by a very well-known comics fan and animation fan, Fred Patton. And I had never seen it before, but he introduced me to, I saw an anime, America's first anime, in fact, that came over in 1961 when I was 10 years old, and it was called Alakazam the Great. Maybe some of you out there have seen that or heard of it. And this was in part directed by Osamu Tezuka, which is how I got to know of his work. And I began to just try to seek out more and more and more of that. So just whenever I could access, if I ever had a chance to get to Little Tokyo or Japantown, that's where that sort of thing was available and nowhere else. You really had to hunt for it.
Are there other questions for Wendy out there? Okay, well, you guys are... Yes, Jeff Rush.
This might be kind of hard to answer, but I was just wondering, because you've talked about animation and movies a lot, and how in many ways comics are just movies on paper, I was wondering, is there something you see as unique to the comics medium that you've been able to achieve, or that people can only achieve in comics?
So the question for the audience that couldn't hear it is, do you see something unique to the comics medium that can only be achieved in comics and not in other art forms?
I think the word that popped into my mind, for whatever it's worth, is immediacy. You read a comic and you have an immediate, impactful experience of the blending of art and writing, and if it's done well, the art doesn't take over the writing and the writing doesn't take over the art. They serve each other. And those are the best comics, that they give you an immediate emotional experience of the storytelling. So I don't think there is any other medium that can give the consumer or the reader such a hit of excitement and just wanting to turn the next page to see what's going to happen. Whether it's action, romance, it really doesn't matter. It's immediate, it's strong, if it's well done. And I think that's the excitement I've always found in comics, particularly through the work of Jack Kirby. He was my Western, Tezuka was my Eastern mentor, Jack Kirby was my Western mentor. And he never knew that, though, because when I met him when I was 19 years old, he indicated to me that he didn't think that comics was a suitable career for a young lady. So, in fact, after looking through my portfolio, he told me if he ever caught me working in comics, he was going to spank me. And so, for years afterwards, whenever we would meet at conventions, and sometimes we would even actually share a table at a convention, I would lean over and say, "Jack, I'm still waiting for my spanking." And because Jack was exactly Ben Grimm, I mean, Ben Grimm is who Jack was, he would blush.
And that raises the point, too, that you've been, a real pioneer in establishing a dignity for women working in comics and a place for women working in comics.
Thank you. That's an honor. Thank you for saying that.
Well, it's an observation. It's just a statement of fact. And so, in your storied career, and I keep saying Hall of Fame career because it's awesome and well-deserved, you've seen these great changes. Can you describe your feelings about these changes and where you would like to see them continue to grow?
I think they are. I think nothing can stop it. I think women have realized that while they must be fighters, they must be warriors, and they must stand strong in their convictions and their vision. They have finally realized that nothing can stop their voices if they just continue and stand up to the bullying and stand up to the belittling and stand up to the traditional diminishing of their work that they've always received from, unfortunately, a rather staunch male comics community. The boys club. I don't know how to describe it. I don't have any prejudices, and I don't consider myself a militant feminist. I just feel that over the years, women have discovered that if you stand up for what you believe, even in the face of really strong criticism and ridicule, that nothing can silence your voice, and nothing's going to stop it now. That's the big change. It used to be you could intimidate women and make them back down. You can't do it anymore. You just can't. So how does he look so far?
Wonderful. I think that actually looks like a good resting point to bring Gene over onto the Elmo projector.
I think so too. I think the drawing is fairly done, and I'd like to sign it. And I look forward to finding out who gets it. Okay.
Thank you so much.